Hello and welcome. You're watching Gravitas. I'm Molly Gambhir. Here's what's lined up for you on the show tonight.
Our world economy is like ship in choppy waters. We need all the wisdom we can muster to steady the ship and navigate through what lies ahead.
In recent months, terms like inflation, rate hikes have become a part of dining table conversations. And why would they not? The fears of a global recession are real. In fact, with each passing day, there is more reason to believe that a recession is on the horizon. Top executives are warning about an impending recession. Look at what's happening to the American economy, and the fears turn even more real. How will America's recession impact you and me and the entire world? What is the situation in the developing countries? Mounting debt in these countries is already intensifying the concerns. And that is our top focus in this edition. The pandemic and then the war in Ukraine, this new decade is clearly off to a bad start, and things could get worse. In recent months, we have been reporting about the risk of a recession, and with every passing day, the projections are getting more grim. Tonight, we will talk about the U.S. economy. Yes, the world's largest economy is flashing warning signs. Here's today's headline. The head of one of America's biggest banks has spoken out. Jamie Dimon thinks that a U.S. recession is only a matter of time. He had a simple message for everyone. This is serious. What is Dimon worried about? Runaway inflation, sharp interest rate hikes, and the war in Ukraine. All these will push the United States into a recession. And the world will feel the impact. Yes, the pain of an American recession will be felt worldwide. What does this mean for you and me? In the next few minutes, we will discuss. First, let's scratch the surface a bit and tell you what is really happening to the American economy. The mood is certainly not optimistic. Let's tell you why. Some surveys came out recently. Nearly 7 in 10 Americans say they are worried about a recession. 4 in 10 say they are not prepared if a recession hits before the end of 2023. Even the business world is concerned. More than 8 out of 10 CEOs anticipate a recession during the next 12 months. KPMG conducted an audit. It spoke to more than 1,300 CEOs of the world's largest economies. 73% believe an economic downturn will disrupt growth. About 39% of the CEOs have implemented a hiring freeze, and 46% are considering downsizing their employee base. Those are some tough calls. But what's driving them? The U.S. economy is shrinking. The GDP of the United States is shrinking. Between January and March this year, growth stood at 1.6%. In July, it fell to 0.6%. So the contraction is apparent. Wall Street is going through a bad phase. The S&P 500 closed its third quarter at its lowest level in almost 2 years. Nasdaq has already dropped nearly 33% so far this year. Dow Jones has lost more than 20%. The impact of the downturn is already trickling down to the citizens. U.S. mortgage rates have more than doubled in the last year. You already know what that means. Millions of Americans who wanted to buy homes will not be able to afford one. Why should we all care about any of this? Because if America goes into recession, the world will feel the pinch. I am not saying this. Well-renowned global experts are. Consider what a top UN official had to say about the possibility of a recession in America. If a financial shock in the US is triggered, there is no limit to the downside. The US ultimately had the policy space to shore up both its economy and its financial system if it finds the political appetite for more bailouts. But most countries in the world, especially in the South, have no real safety net. Let me simplify this for you. Our world is interconnected, so once the recession gets triggered in the US, it will put pressure on the global economy. America might be in a position to finance a bailout of the corporate world, but the rest of the world is not. There is a serious debt burden on many developing countries. Again, the United Nations is sounding an alarm about this. Here is another UN report. At least 54 developing economies are suffering from severe debt problems. They represent 18% of the global population. Over 50% live in extreme poverty. How big is this debt pile? There are some estimates. The developing world owed over $11 trillion in 2021. That is the big risk. On one hand, you have shortages and inflationary pressures. On the other, a massive debt pile. Even the International Monetary Fund is concerned about the present situation of the global economy.
World economy is like ship in choppy waters. We need all the wisdom we can muster to steady the ship and navigate through what lies ahead. In less than 3 years, we lived through shock after shock after shock. First, COVID, then Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and climate disasters on all continents. These shocks have caused immense harm on people's lives. Their combined impact is driving a global surge in prices, especially on food and energy, causing a cost of living crisis. And dealing with them is made harder by geopolitical fragmentation.
Geopolitical fragmentation. That is the biggest challenge right now, because a divided world is putting the global economy at risk. Here is an example of that. The great power rivalry between the US and China is intensifying, and it could affect your next gadget purchase. America has announced sweeping changes to export rules. Chip sales to China are being restricted. Companies would need to now get a license to sell certain kinds of chips to China. A ban has also been put in place. US firms will not be able to sell chips for supercomputing and artificial intelligence to Chinese companies. Beijing is unhappy about Washington's moves.
Out of
the need to maintain its sci-tech hegemony, the United States abuses export control measures to maliciously block and suppress Chinese companies. This practice deviates from the principle of fair competition and violates international economic and trade rules. It will not only damage the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese companies, but also affect American companies' interests.
Chips are everywhere these days. In your smartphones, your tablets, your cars, even medical devices. China is still at the center of tech manufacturing. According to one estimate, around 90% of the world's electronics come from Shenzhen. Before the pandemic, just one city in China supplied to the world. The American chips ban could dramatically change that number. Less supply could come through China, and that could mean your gadgets, at least temporarily, get a little more expensive. Let's now shift focus to Ukraine. It's day 229 of the war. The fighting persists. So do the Russian strikes. To put it very bluntly, it's raining missiles in Ukraine. The latest to get hit is Lviv. Just a couple of hours back, it came under attack. The target was a critical energy facility. It crumbled under the impact of missiles. The city experienced a blackout. Authorities say the power outages may extend to nearby regions as well. Shortly before Lviv was bombed, there was an attack on Zaporizhia as well. Russia dropped at least 12 missiles on the city. Images from the site show a trail of destruction as firefighters struggle to douse the flames. Look at these images now. They are chilling to say the least. They capture a dramatic explosion on a busy street in the city of Dnipro. The impact sent debris crashing down on cars. You have to watch this. The attacks on Ukraine are fierce. The damage is overwhelming, but that does not mean Russia is winning this war. Ukraine is also making significant gains. It is reclaiming towns captured by Russia. According to reports, Ukraine has reclaimed over 29 towns and villages in the Kherson region, like Izium, Kupiansk, and Lyman. The Russian soldiers stationed in these towns have retreated. Ukrainian flags have been planted again. In the same areas, Ukraine has also captured Russian armor left behind by the retreating troops. How many of them? According to the UK intel agencies, over 440 Russian tanks and 650 armored vehicles have been captured by Ukrainian troops. This was as far as the situation on the ground is concerned as a result of the war. Let's now talk about the efforts to end the war. On Monday, the United Nations General Assembly held a session. It was over a motion brought in by Albania, a motion condemning Russia's actions. Right before it was convened, Moscow had asked for the vote to be held through a secret ballot, a request that was denied by the majority. Its request was rejected by over 107 UN member states. Only 13 nations voted in favor of Russia's call, while 39 others abstained from the vote. Among the countries that rejected Russia's request was India. New Delhi voted to reject the Russian demand. Shortly after the vote, a host of UN members expressed solidarity with Ukraine, accusing Russia of violating several sacred UN principles. Listen to this.
Putin is trying to take Ukraine's land, its resources, its identity. In doing so, he is overturning the most sacred principle in the international system, that borders cannot be drawn by force.
Mr. President, in principle, the upcoming vote on the draft resolution presented by Ukraine should be indisputable, a strong and resounding yes. The states which do not recognize the independence of the so-called Donbas People's Republic should not recognize their attempted illegal incorporation to Russia.
By willfully undermining the rules-based international order and blatantly and repeatedly violating Ukraine's independence, sovereignty and territorial integrity, Russia is putting global peace and security at risk.
Look at these images now. This is the president of the UAE arriving at the Pulkovo airport in St. Petersburg. Why has he gone there? Two things. One, the threat this war has created for the world's energy supplies. And two, the pressure on OPEC plus nations to increase the oil output. Remember, the UAE has maintained a neutral stance on this war, despite being a long-time ally of the United States. So this visit is significant, given how the UAE, along with other Gulf nations, refused to increase oil output to Europe. So 8 months into this war, this is where things stand. Russian strikes continue unabated. Ukrainian forces are making advances. Global bodies are stuck at doing what they do best: condemnation and issuing statements. And neutral players are still hedging their bets. So imagine this. You are playing cricket. You are the captain of the team. The match is a tie and it's headed for a tiebreaker. To win, your team needs to play its best over. Ideally, try and hit a 6 in every ball. So what do you do as the captain? Send your best players to the pitch, right? Now, Vladimir Putin is playing one such match. It's not cricket, but a game of geopolitics, a game of war and peace. He had a lead in the match. Now Ukraine is making gains. To seal the game, Putin needs to bring his best players into the stadium. And that is exactly what he has done. He has put Russia's so-called General Armageddon in charge of the Ukraine war. Our next report tells you all about this Russian military commander who is infamous for his ruthlessness.
When a flurry of rockets landed in civilian areas of Kyiv, Kremlin watchers knew exactly what was going on behind the scenes in Russia. The country's military was following the command of its new commander, General Armageddon.
The Russian Defense Minister has appointed Army General Sergei Surovikin as commander of the combined groups of troops in the area of the special military operation.
Meet Sergei Surovikin. He is 55. In the West, the man is known for his ruthlessness. His colleagues call him General Armageddon. Some believe that Surovikin is the best general the Russian military has. The man is a hardliner. His approach to war is orthodox. In 1991, he asked men under him to fire at pro-democracy protesters. This was in the months leading up to the collapse of the Soviet Union. 3 protesters were killed in the operation, and Surovikin was jailed. He walked out 6 months later without trial. 4 years later, Surovikin was back in prison. This time, it was for illegal arms trade. Goes without saying, Surovikin has a reputation. In 2004, he was stationed in Chechnya. By then, he was already widely feared. It did not help that in 2004, a colonel serving under Surovikin killed himself. What happened? The Russian media says the colonel was reprimanded. Surovikin's next big assignment was Syria. In 2017, Russians were fighting on the side of President Bashar al-Assad. And Surovikin was the commander of the aerospace forces. Surovikin led dozens of attacks. He says that while performing combat operations in Syria, not for once did he forget that he was defending Russia and Russian interests. How did that go? Surovikin oversaw indiscriminate bombing, allegedly also the use of chemical weapons. The Human Resource Watch believes that under Surovikin, Russian forces struck Syrian homes, schools, healthcare facilities and markets, the places where people live, work and study. A report published in 2020 listed the Russian general as one of the commanders who may bear command responsibility for violations during the Idlib offensive. What kind of violations are we talking about? The use of chemical weapons. Russia awarded Surovikin with a very special title, the Hero of Russia, also decorated him with a medal for his service in Syria. It was also during his time in Syria that Surovikin became close to private military company, the Wagner mercenary group. Its founder once called Surovikin the most competent commander in the Russian army. Surovikin's biggest challenge in Ukraine will be to lead the counter-offensive. There is also a shortage of manpower and weapons. What is Surovikin's plan? Will he be applying the Syrian playbook in Ukraine? In his previous assignments, Surovikin has shown the ability to wage wars that involve biological and chemical weapons. And that is the kind of brand that Putin might encash right now. He has repeatedly threatened a nuclear escalation. With the appointment of Sergei Surovikin, Putin is showing that he also has commanders who are capable of escalating the conflict. Surovikin began his new assignment by sending rockets into Ukraine and attacking civilian areas.
Let's now shift our attention to China. Beijing also is waging a war at home, a war against pollution. The Communist Party is gearing up for its 20th Congress. The event begins on Sunday. Do you know what the Chinese leadership is worried about? Blue skies. You heard that right. Special measures are being put in place. Steel mills in Hebei have got orders. They have been asked to limit their output. Hebei is right next to Beijing. It is a sort of a steel-producing hub. Local authorities have asked the manufacturers to go slow for the next few days. That means production cuts of 30 to 50%. Have you ever heard a country asking factories to cut back on production for a major event? There is a good chance that your answer to this question would be China. Perhaps the first time China came up with this blue skies policy was during the Olympics. Pollution levels had hit record levels in Beijing before the event. So China instituted the blue skies policy. Tougher emission standards were imposed on coal-fired plants. China reduced the number of cars on the roads. Local officials were given environmental targets. People at home also had to get rid of coal-fired boilers. The blue skies policy is now back, this time for Xi Jinping's coronation. He is about to receive a historic term extension, one that will confirm his place as the president for life. It will happen during the Communist Party Congress. The preparations are underway and we have the first pictures from Beijing. Security has been stepped up. There are dozens of security personnel and paramilitary officers at key checkpoints of China's capital. The enhanced security measures are already affecting the life of the locals. Listen in to what the locals have to say.
我觉得20大这一天确实查得比较严格，然后因为要开会嘛，所以就是有很多警力也都派到咱们这边，然后在长安街那部分就会有很多的交警啊什么的进行巡查，还蛮严格的。
快递上可能会有延迟，就比如说有很进京的包裹呀，就是受限比较多嘛，有些不能发货北京什么之类的。包括就是国庆旅游，好多朋友同事去外地旅游了之后，他们回北京就是说困难就相对会比以前大一些，就是有一些进京限制这些。总体来看呢，我觉得就是说影响其实不是很大，但是确实稍微严了那么一丢丢。
So that is what's happening in Beijing. Let's now tell you what the Communist Party is up to. Civil servants are being reined in before that big event. They have received instructions. What are these orders? Civil servants have been asked to fix their behavior. They have a reputation of behaving badly with their colleagues and citizens. So here is what they have been asked to do now. They cannot throw or toss papers at citizens, even if they have been filled out incorrectly. Frontline government workers have been asked to treat government workers with more attention and respect. The next set of orders features a list of banned phrases, things that civil servants should not say in office. Listen to this. This is very interesting. This is the list of the banned phrases, what the Chinese civil servants can no longer say. Don't you understand Chinese? Chop chop, I'm off work. There is a sign, read it. Haven't I just told you that? What's the hurry? Can't you see I'm busy now? And finally, none of my business, ask someone else. Seems like dealing with a Chinese civil servant can be your worst nightmare. And there is more. There is speculation that civil servants could be banned from drinking. This would be a complete and total ban. Civil servants will not be able to drink both on and off the job. The stock markets have taken notice of these reports, in fact. Shares of liquor makers dropped sharply yesterday. The Communist Party Congress starts on Sunday, and we will be keeping an eye on all the developments. Let's turn to Iran now, where anti-government protests have escalated courtesy the death of another teenager, Nika Shakarami, a 16-year-old girl who was found mysteriously dead after being missing for 10 days. She has become the new figurehead of this anti-government movement. The news of her death had already sparked outrage, and now the circumstances under which she died are further fueling public fury. Let me explain. On the 20th of September, Nika Shakarami attended a protest. She was seen burning her headscarf and chanting anti-government slogans. Her friends say shortly after this video was shot, she was chased by security forces and went missing. 10 days later, Nika's family located her body at a mortuary. They say she was killed by Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps. Iranian authorities do not agree, and they are telling a different version, one that revolves around this video. It was released on Iranian state TV last week, which claimed that the teenager entered a building where she was possibly thrown from by workmen. That is the bizarre explanation that's being offered by the Iranian authorities. Nika's family is saying it's way too scripted, both the explanation and the video. They, in fact, say the footage is fake and the authorities are lying. Last we checked, Iranian authorities had detained her family members as well. Now, this entire episode has become the new focal point of this movement. A new rallying cry against the state-sponsored atrocities that Iranians deal with. A hashtag with her name has been trending for weeks. It has given a new life of sorts to this movement. From Tehran, the protests have reached far-off cities. Like Mahabad, a quaint city in northwest Iran, students here have hit the streets. They are waving their headscarves, calling for the brutalities to end. In the country's Bushehr province, protests are being held even at the oil refineries. Have a look at these images. These are workers from the Abadan oil refinery staging a protest in solidarity with Iranian women. They were seen chanting, "Don't be scared." Iranian observers say this protest is very significant. The one happening at the Abadan oil refinery. Why is that? Because it is the largest oil refinery in Iran and the oldest in all of West Asia. In the 1970s, strikes at this refinery played a crucial role in the uprising that toppled the former Shah of Iran. The protest started from here and spread to other refineries. Is history about to repeat itself? Well, we can't say for sure, given how powerful the Iranian regime has become. But even then, many believe that it's not strong enough to withstand strikes at oil refineries. The country's economy technically depends on them, so if more workers strike, the consequences could be far-reaching. In fact, Western media is already calling strikes in the oil sector a milestone. How is the Iranian government dealing with them? In 2 words, with ignorance. It's refusing to acknowledge the public anger and blaming the protests on a foreign conspiracy. The foreign ministry says it will not allow any country to interfere with its internal affairs. Listen to this.
The internal issue of the Islamic Republic of Iran is related to the government and the nation of Iran. We will not allow any country to interfere in the internal affairs of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
So which countries does Iran think are interfering in its internal affairs? The United States and Israel. Last week, its supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei himself made that charge. He said the 2 allies are behind these protests, which he described as riots. Now, here's the thing. Foreign powers may or may not be trying to escalate these protests, but the way Iran is cracking down on its own citizens, the way Iranian teenagers are disappearing, surely says a lot about the state of affairs. If anything, it only justifies the anger on the streets. Meanwhile, West Asia, the usually volatile zone, has delivered some peaceful news. Israel and Lebanon have agreed on a maritime boundary. What is this deal all about? And what will be its impact on the region? Our next report getting you the answer.
Israel and Lebanon have a history of conflict. Lebanon has been home to Palestinian refugees. Hezbollah has its headquarters in Beirut. The countries don't share diplomatic relations, so it's no surprise that the relationship is mired in bad blood. But there may be signs of a thaw. Israel and Lebanon have agreed to settle their maritime border.
I commend the announcement by the Lebanese president accepting the agreement. The state of Israel is interested in having a stable and prosperous Lebanese neighbor. The agreement to which we are progressing is fair and positive for both sides.
Hezbollah has also reportedly agreed to the new demarcation. Both countries have called the U.S. mediated talks a success. The Lebanese president, Michael Aoun, is set to announce the deal.
The effort that was put during the past week was for both sides to consider that each obtained the guarantees they wanted and took what they wanted in a fair agreement. For us, the file is completed. Today, it is placed before the president. The matter is now in his hands, and the atmosphere is very positive towards the work done by the U.S. mediator and the U.S. administration, because I can really say today that we have reached a deal that satisfies both sides. And everyone knows how difficult it is to have such a solution.
Israel's Prime Minister Yair Lapid has called it a historic deal. Lapid is expected to seek government approval for the bill on Wednesday. It will then be reviewed by the Knesset. So why are both parties pleased with this deal? The new demarcation will split offshore oil fields between the nations. Israel has already been exploiting the oil fields in the region, but their drilling was under threat from attacks by Hezbollah. The New Deal gives the operations added security. Lebanon, on the other hand, hasn't started exploiting the oil fields, but it can begin prospecting now. If oil is found, it could help alleviate Lebanon's financial crisis. The country has been in dire straits since 2019. Oil money could help relieve some of the pressure. All signs indicate that both parties are satisfied. Reports are calling it a rare phenomenon in geopolitics. A win-win deal.
And talking of win-win deals, what if you had no say in deals regarding your future? What if your future was under threat, but you had no legal rights to defend yourself? Well, thankfully for human beings, that's taken care of. We all have legal rights. We have a way to represent ourselves and be represented. We have a way to safeguard these rights, to fight for our basic rights and seek redressal. But have you ever wondered about the rights of non-human beings? What about their legal rights? Non-human entities like trees, animals, rivers. Well, according to some experts, granting legal rights and protection to animals, trees and rivers is essential if countries want to tackle the impact of climate change and biodiversity loss. The authors of a report titled Law in the Emerging Bio-Age say legal frameworks have a key part to play in governing human interactions with the environment and biotechnology. The report for the Law Society, the professional body for solicitors in England and Wales, talks about how the relationship between humans and our planet could change in the future. We, in fact, spoke to one of the co-authors of this report. Here's what she said about the importance of ensuring legal rights for non-human entities.
What is really important about this research project, which we did for the Law Society UK, which is a membership organization of legal professionals, and what they were concerned about was how the law profession itself could start working more proactively to ensure that not only are we protecting the rest of the web of life, the animals we share the planet with, the plant life we share the planet with, our very ecologies.
In fact, this is not asking for too much. Some nations like Ecuador and Bolivia have already set out rights for the natural world. There is also a campaign to make ecocide a prosecutable offense at the International Criminal Court. What is ecocide? The destruction of the natural environment by deliberate or negligent human action. Look at what's already happening in Spain. The endangered Mar Menor lagoon has been granted legal status as a person, meaning the legislation recognizes the lagoon's right to protection, conservation and restoration. Also look at how businesses, corporations are also protected. In most countries, a corporation has the same rights as a natural person to hold property, enter into contracts and to sue or be sued. So asking for legal rights for non-human entities is important, more so given how climate change has been making its impact felt, thanks to the action of human beings. Also given how animals are increasingly under threat. A story from New Zealand has been making headlines. Nearly 500 pilot whales have died in mass strandings on remote New Zealand islands. And stories like these are unfortunately becoming a lot more frequent. So it all sounds good. Non-human entities need to have legal rights, but how exactly will this work out? What would the immediate challenges be? The authors of this report outlined how widespread adoption of rights for non-human life forms would radically change the legal and ethical balance between humans and living systems. The report does say that giving rights to non-human entities would raise necessary questions regarding the liability for environmental damage, as well as compensation for the damage caused. The development in biotechnology has also raised questions about the ethics of bringing back species from extinction. And this comes as scientists are also exploring reintroducing woolly mammoths, for example. There have also been discussions regarding wiping out mosquitoes which carry malaria and other diseases. All said and done, such moves to push for rights for non-human entities raise significant questions. And nudges like these are the need of the hour. How seriously this push is taken, however, is a different matter altogether. Now here's a question. What is your opinion on remote working? Do you think it ensures a better work-life balance? Or does it blur the line between the two? Why am I asking you this question? Because I want to tell you about two stories, both involving work from home or remote working, but they could not be more different. The first one is about employee monitoring. An employer moved court against his former employee. He said the employer wanted him to keep his webcam on during his work hours. We are talking about 8 hours daily. Who does that? Apparently, companies do. The one in question is a US-based software company. It's called Setu. It fired the employee because he refused to keep his camera on at all times or share his laptop screen. The company said the employee's refusal to be monitored amounted to refusal to work, even insubordination. The employee was from the Netherlands. After he was fired, he moved a local court. What did the court say? It ruled in the employee's favor and said that tracking via camera is an intrusion into the employee's private life. And Setu was ordered to pay the employee nearly $73,000. Now, one could argue that the employer was monitoring work hours, not the employee's after hours. But does that make monitoring an employee acceptable? The question is, while you commit 8 or 9 hours of your day to your employer, does your work contract give the employer the right to watch over you or, in a way, be the big brother? Digital.com conducted a survey in 2021. Over 1,200 employees were interviewed. The survey found that 60% of remote employees were using work monitoring software. 90% of these companies said they had fired employees based on the data from this software, from these software platforms. So employee monitoring is a reality. It may be illegal in many countries, including the US, but that does not stop employers from being hawkish. Now to the next story, and this one is pole opposite. It's about another American company, Google. It is allowing employees to work from anywhere for 4 weeks in a year. The idea is to give everyone more flexibility for holiday travel. These two stories represent the two opposite sides of our current workspaces: flexibility versus employee monitoring. There are some companies that are more than happy to just let their employees be. They are not bothered about where they work from as long as they deliver. It's no wonder then that a pub chain in the UK is launching a work from pub scheme. Basically, you pay £15 or around $16 and you get Wi-Fi, a workspace, unlimited tea, coffee and lunch. So back to the question, does work from home ensure better work-life balance or does it blur the line? 2 stories later, I think you would agree with me when I say that it all boils down to the employer. Some employers have come to terms with the fact that an employee's activity does not equate to productivity. Her physical presence in office or remote working does not determine her outcome. And there are others who you could say are more orthodox in their approach, who look at the hours that you clock in, the number of video meetings that you attended, for example. I don't know how many of you know this. There are software that enable employers to monitor your work activity without using cameras. On Microsoft 365, for example, an employer can pull out data on how many emails a worker sent or how many files they saved on a shared drive, how many video meetings they participated in. Same with Google Workspace. If your office is using Google's work tools, then your manager can see how many emails you sent out or received, how many employees attended a particular meeting. But does this data say much? Think about it. Sending emails is a surface level activity. It's not the best scale of measurement for productivity. Similarly, one could be sitting in front of her system all day but not doing much. So is employee monitoring even desirable? The future of work lies in recognizing outcome over output, in giving employees the flexibility that they need to deliver their best. One could be working from office, a pub, a hill station, or a beach, or not sitting in front of her system for 8 or 9 hours. It should not matter as long as she is delivering and adding value to the organization. Do you agree? Write to us and tell us what you think. Let's now tell you what else made news. Time for Gravitas Global Headlines.
United States and other G7 powers will hold crisis talks on Russia's recent bombing blitz across Ukraine, with UK Prime Minister expected to insist they must not waver one iota in their support for Kyiv. Germany will discuss the United States' Inflation Reduction Act with Washington to address competition concerns. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz told industry representatives at an engineering conference in Berlin that Germany must cooperate with other countries to prevent a massive customs war between all kinds of countries. Hong Kong Chief Executive John Lee said that there was no legal basis for the city to act on Western sanctions. This comes in relation to a Russian yacht anchored in Hong Kong. The yacht belongs to a sanctioned Russian oligarch. Singapore Airlines flight attendants will no longer be let go after becoming pregnant, says the carrier, as it ditches the long criticized practice. At least one person died during clashes with police in Haiti. This as people's frustration with the government continues to rise. The woman died as protests devolved into a hotel looting in Port-au-Prince.
5 dealers is that they knowingly and recklessly sell firearms, military-style weapons, to straw purchasers.
Mexico's government has filed a lawsuit against 5 Arizona gun dealers, accusing them of participating in illicit weapons trafficking in an ongoing push to hold retailers responsible for the deadly trade. Around 16 tons of drugs have been incinerated in Peru. These drugs were seized in operations carried out between July and September. The death toll from landslides in Venezuela has risen to 36. Around 56 people were also reported missing after 5 small rivers in central Venezuela flooded due to heavy rains. As per officials, at least 3,000 rescue workers have been deployed to assist people in affected areas. India beat South Africa by 7 wickets in the third and final one-day international in Delhi to clinch the 3-match series 2-1. Kuldeep Yadav put up a show claiming 4 wickets to restrict the visitors to just 99 runs. Shubham Gill top-scored for India with 49 runs as they knocked off the target in 19.1 overs. The National Women's Soccer League terminated Orlando Pride's head coach Amanda Cromwell and assistant Sam Green's contracts after finding the two had engaged in retaliatory conduct. Cromwell and Green tried to trade players who they believed had made or supported misconduct allegations against them earlier in the year.
With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas, leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks very much for watching.